Hi everyone, my name is Similoluwa. Welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be making this beautiful luxury ball dress for a 4-year-old baby girl. So if this is something you're interested in, kindly keep on watching, like, share and subscribe. I'm going to be starting by drafting the pattern for my front bodice. I ruled out a straight line and this is my shoulder line. Then from my shoulder line, I marked 9 inches, which is the length of my bodice. And I'm going to be ruling that into a straight line as well. Then I'll be adding ½ inch for seam allowance to join to the skirt part. And I'm going to be ruling this out as well. Then that part is my center front because this pattern will be cut on fold. I have attached a standard measurement for a 4-year-old girl. The armhole is 4.5 and that's what I'm marking out now from the shoulder line. Then I am going to be dividing my shoulder width by 2, which is 9.5 divided by 2, that's 4.75. I'm going to be marking this on the shoulder line and I'm going to be adding ½ inch for seam allowance. I'll be marking the same thing on my armhole line and I'm going to be joining both points with a straight line. Now I'll be coming down by 0.5 inch on my shoulder line for my shoulder slope. Then I'll mark what I have, measure what I have left, and that's 4 inches. I'm going to be dividing it by 2. Then at that point I'll be coming in by ½ inch. I'll be marking my neck width. I marked 2 inches for this neck width. You can use whatever neck width you're comfortable with. Then I also did 2 inches for the neck depth, and I'm going to be joining both points using broken lines, and I later join my broken lines. Next, I'm going to be dividing my chest measurements by 4, and that's 23 divided by 4, which is about 5.75. Then I added 1 inch for my seam allowance. So now I'm going to be joining these 3 points. For my shoulder points to the ½ inch I came by, then to my chest measurements divided by 4. I'm going to be joining these 3 points together. Then I'll be marking the same thing I have on my chest line on my waistline, because this is for a kid. They don't really have a lot of shape on their body, so it's just a straight line right there. Then in order to mark out my yoke, from the shoulder line I'll be coming down by 3.5 inches for my yoke, for the front yoke. So I don't want it to be straight, so I'm just going to be making a slight curve from the center line down to my center front pattern, just to give it a slight curve at that point right there. So at that point when I'm cutting out, I'll make sure I had my 0.5 inch joining allowance. I also added my shoulder joining allowance of 0.5 inch at the shoulder line, and I'm just marking that to make sure I cut my pattern on fold. And that is all we have for the front bodice pattern. After separating my yoke from my bodice, I made sure to indicate on my pattern that I will be adding 0.5 inch joining allowance to both sides, both pattern, both for the yoke and for the bodice, so that I don't forget that. So please take note of that. For the back pattern, I already marked out all my horizontal line, and I made sure to mark out my zipper allowance of 1 inch. I'm just trying to confirm shoulder to waist is 9 inches, shoulder to chest line is 4.5 inch. Then I'm marking half of my shoulder measurement plus ½ inch seam allowance, and I'm marking the same thing on my chest line as well. I'm going to be coming down by ½ inch for my shoulder slope, same thing I did on the front pattern. Then my neck width is 2 inches, but for the neck depth for the back I made use of 4 inches for my neck depth. So I'm going to be connecting it in form of a V because I want the back neckline to be a V neckline, and I'm going to be connecting this line into my zipper allowance. Next, then it is at this point I also want my back yoke to start from. I want my back heel to be 4 inches. Next, I'll be marking 1/4 of my chest measurements plus 1 inch seam allowance, marking the same thing on my waist plus 1 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to be connecting it into a straight line. Next, I'll be connecting my back armhole. The back armhole, you really don't need to come out by 1/2 inch like you did for the front, so I just came out by about 0.25 inches and I connected it to my chest line. Then I'll be adding my shoulder joining allowance of 0.5 inch. Also, don't forget, when you cut off your yoke, you're going to be adding your joining allowance of 0.5 on both the yoke and the bodice. And now it's time to cut. For the skirt part, I folded my fabric into 2 at first, then I folded it into 2 again in order to cut my full circle. Now my waist, I added 5 inches or about 6 inches plus my zipper allowance, and I divided this by 6.25 in order to get my radius. Then I added the length of my skirt part to my radius, so that's how I got the length of what I folded. So now I'm marking my radius, and I'm marking it from the center point, from that edge right there. Then I'm marking the length of my skirt, which is about 21.5 inches. So I'm just going to be marking this all the way around from the radius that I got. If you want me to make a full detailed tutorial on how to make a circle skirt or just how to make a pattern for a circle skirt, please let me know in the comment section, because I don't want this video to be too long, so I don't want to go into details of how to cut this circle skirt. So I'm just trying to reconfirm what I have on my waist. My waist on the skirt part is actually bigger than what I have on the bodies. That's because I'm going to be having pleats on the skirt part. Now I'll be opening one side of this full circle, just one of the full circle. So this is what we have. I'm going to be notching my center point. Then moving on to the bodies, I'm going to be cutting out my bodies now on fabric, remembering to add my 0.5 seam allowance at that top part alone. I already added seam allowance to the remainder parts of this pattern, remember. So I'm just adding my 0.5 at that point there, and I'm going to be cutting out the rest following the pattern. I also made sure that I notched my zipper allowance. So this is the front pattern. I am making sure to pin it and cut it on fold, and it's just the same, basically the same thing. I made sure to add 0.5 inch at that upper part, and I cut the rest just the way it is on the pattern. Now moving on to my yoke, I'm going to be using this 2 nets to cut my yoke. For the front yoke, I'm going to be cutting double of it, and remember it's also going to be on fold. So I'm cutting double of it and it's going to be on fold. So I'll make sure to also add my 0.5 inch allowance at the bottom part, the joining allowance at the bottom part that I indicated earlier. for the back yoke, I want that neck depth part to be on fold. I don't want to have any joining there in order to make my work easier. So I just made sure I place the neck depth part on fold and I cut it out. So because this is already on fold, I don't need to cut out 4. I'll just be cutting out 2, if you get what I'm saying. So the first thing I'll be doing now is to join my front yoke, and I'm going to be joining the neckline by about 0.25 inches. After that, I will make sure I trim very well, as close to the seam line as possible, because you don't want the seam allowance showing. Then I'll be turning it the other way and I'll be giving it a very good press. Please make sure you place a piece of fabric on your tool when you're ironing so you don't burn it. Then I'll move on to my front piece. I also cut out a lining for the front bodice with my bridal satin. So this is exactly how I'm going to be placing it in order to join the yoke to the main bodice. So I'm marking the center point of my yoke, making sure I match both center points together. Then I'll first join the yoke to the bodice just like this, so that it is easier, especially if you're a beginner. Then I'm going to be placing my lining piece right sides facing each other, and then I'll now go ahead and join it to what I already have with 1/2 inch. So after joining, this is what we have. Just trying to confirm my bodice length and it is still accurate. Then I'm going to be notching my seam allowance so that it relaxes properly, and I'm going to give it a top stitch on the lining piece. This is just to ensure that it relaxes properly and I'm able to turn it. So after giving it a top stitch, I am going to give it a good press. Moving on to the back, I already cut out my lining piece as well. I'm going to be doing the exact same thing I did for the front part. So I went ahead to iron my yoke so that it lays very flat, especially the fold part, and I'll make sure I place my yoke after my zipper allowance. Remember, it was cut after zipper allowance, and after doing that, I would notch my seam allowance, do my top stitch, and give it a good press as well. Moving on to the pleats details that I have on my front bodies, I cut this tool of less than 1 yard and I folded it into 2. Then I am marking 1 inch interval on the tool at different parts. Just watch what I'm doing and you understand it. So afterwards, I'm going to be pleating this 1 inch on top of the other, just like as if you're forming a pleat, and I'm going to be securing it with my pins, but I had to mark it at different points so that the pleats are straight, if you get what I'm saying. So you just see what I'm doing, and I made sure to overlap the pleat so that it forms a beautiful design. So that's just what I did here on this tool net. So after I made enough pleats, I went ahead to give it a very good press so that it is flat. Then I am going to be placing it diagonally like this across my front bodies on only the main fabric, please, not on the lining. So I'll be placing it like this, and I'll be cutting out the rest. Then the rest of the pleats, I place it across, just so it forms that design on the bodice. So once I made sure that they overlap at the center point, I am going to be pinning everything down, making sure to secure it. then before I go ahead to stitch this down. So when you're doing this, you have to be very careful so that your pin does not break your machine needle. You have to like take your time. I took about over 5 minutes to arrange these pleats and actually stitch them down. So I will advise you to be patient while doing this so that your pin doesn't get in the way of your sewing, and ensure you stitch it on the wrong side. Yes, so it's easier that way. Oops. My pleats unraveled there, but I arranged it back. That's because I have already pressed it properly. So I did the same thing on the other side like this. I stitched it down on the wrong side, making sure that my pins are out of the way. So that's me trying to remove my pins out of the way. You just have to take it slow. After stitching it down, I am going to be removing my pins, and I'm going to be cutting out the excess pleats that I have. Now I cut out my belt, which is about 4 inches by 28.5 inches. I cut 2 of this. Then at one edge of it, I'm going to be giving it this slight curve here. Then I'm going to be sewing on the wrong side of it. I'm going to be joining. Then because this fabric frays a lot, after joining it, I overlocked it from the inside and I turned it out and gave it a good press. To attach my belt, I'm coming up at that edge by 0.5 inches, which is my joining allowance. I don't want to get rid of my joining allowance, so I'm going to be placing it like this, pinning it down, and I'm going to be stitching on it to secure it. In order to join my shoulders, I will be making use of French seams, so I'm placing it wrong sides facing each other just like this, and I'm pinning it down. So you see the right side is facing me. When I turn the back to the right side will be facing me. That's because I'm going to be using the French seam to secure my shoulder. So after pinning it like this, I'll go ahead and join it by 0.25 inches first. Yes, so after joining by 0.25 inches, I'm going to be trimming out my seam allowance as close to the seam as I can. Then after trimming out my seam allowance, I'm going to be turning it over. This shoulder seam, I'm going to be turning it over to the wrong side. Give it a good press. Then I'll make sure I sandwich the remaining seam allowance, and I'm going to be stitching down by another 0.25 inches. So I'll show you as I do that. So I already pressed my seam flat right now. Now this is the wrong side, and now I'm going to be sandwiching my remaining seam allowance in between my stitches. You get what I'm saying? I'm just going to be sewing down by 0.25 inches. If you don't get this part, you can replay again so you get it. Remember, this is now the wrong side. Now when we flip it to the right side, this is what we have. So you see my seam is neat both on the inside and on the outside. I don't have any rough tool, and also this seam is quite strong, and it is very good for this ball dress because the ball dress is quite heavy. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be joining my bodice, fabric to fabric, lining to lining. You can see the way I'm doing it, making sure I sandwich my belts, that my belt doesn't get in the way. So I'm going to be pinning the fabric of the front to the fabric of the back, making sure I match my sides, and I'm going to be joining them by 1 inch. Remember, 1 inch is our seam allowance for the side. So I made sure to pin, and then I'll go ahead and join. After joining, I also made sure that I overlocked the seam allowance because this fabric frays. So in the second part, I will show you how I finished up this dress. Thank you.